Emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman is discussing his famous impulse control test at a San Francisco lecture and has the entire audience's attention. Goleman, a psychologist and science writer, is the author of the bestseller Emotional Intelligence, a fascinating book about recent discoveries in brain research that prove emotional stability important than IQ in determining an individual's success in life. One of the highlights of the book, Goleman explains to his audience of foundation leaders, educators, and grants donors, is a test administered 30 years ago that Goleman calls the Marshmallow Challenge. In this experiment, 4-year-old children were individually called into a room at Stanford University during the 1960s. There, a kind man gave a marshmallow to each of them and said they could eat the marshmallow right away or wait for him to come back from an errand, at which point they would get 2 marshmallows. Goleman gets everyone laughing as he describes watching a film of the preschoolers while they waited for the nice man to come back. Some of them covered their eyes or rested their heads on their arms so they wouldn't have to look at the marshmallow, or played games or sang to keep their thoughts off the single marshmallow and waited for the promised double prize. Others, about a third of the group, simply watched the man leave and ate the marshmallow within seconds. What is surprising about this test, claims Goleman, is its diagnostic power. A dozen years later, the same children were tracked down as adolescents and tested again. The emotional and social difference between the grab-the-marshmallow preschoolers and their gratification-delaying peers was dramatic, Goleman says. The ones who had resisted eating the marshmallow were clearly more socially competent than the others. They were less likely to go to pieces, freeze, or regress under stress, or become rattled and disorganized when pressured. They embraced challenges and pursued them instead of giving up, even in the face of difficulties. They were self-reliant and confident, trustworthy and dependable. The third or so who grabbed the marshmallow were more likely to be seen as shying away from social contacts, to be stubborn and indecisive, to be easily upset by frustrations, to think of themselves as unworthy, to become immobilized by stress, to be mistrustful or prone to jealousy, or to overreact to certain situations with a sharp temper. And all because of a single marshmallow? In fact, Goleman explains, it's all because of a lone neuron in the brain, only recently discovered, that bypasses the neocortex, the area of the brain where rational decisions are made, and goes straight to the amygdala, or emotional center of the brain. It is here that quicker, more primitive fight or flight responses occur and are stored for future use. The more that emotional memories involving temper, frustration, anxiety, depression, impulse, and fear pile up in early adolescence, the more the amygdala can hijack the rest of the brain, Goleman says, by flooding it with strong and inappropriate emotions, causing us to wonder later, why did I overreact? But if the emotions stored in the brain are those of restraint, self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation, empathy, hope, and optimism, then we become endowed with an emotional intelligence that serves rather than enslaves us for the rest of our lives. The bad news, says Goleman, is that a widely praised but disturbing study from the University of Vermont has shown a decline in emotional aptitude among children across the board, rich or poor, East Coast or West Coast, inner city or suburb. Children today are more vulnerable than ever to anger, depression, anxiety, what he calls a massive emotional malaise. The good news, however, involves another recent discovery, that the amygdala takes a long time to mature, around 15 or 16 years, which means to Goleman that emotional intelligence can be taught, not only in the home, but perhaps, more importantly, in school. Goleman's own story is as intriguing as his book. The author or co-author of nearly a dozen other books involving brain research and behavior, he experienced steady but modest sales until emotional intelligence hit the stores. Later came the cover of Time magazine and appearances on television, such as The Oprah Winfrey Show. But I think the book also points out the real strength in what has been a feminine preserve in this culture, claims Goleman. Girls are raised to be emotionally astute and perceptive, but sons learn little about emotions except how to control anger. Women are absolutely more empathetic than men on average, but they've felt powerless to bring up the idea of emotions as a serious topic. The irony, Goleman feels, is that if he had written a book about women and emotions, school reform, emotion-based leadership in business, or child psychology, the book wouldn't have gotten much attention. As it happens, this is a book about all those things. But women and children and school reform are marginalized in this society. So I come along with a lot of scientific data that says, hey, this stuff is consequential. And maybe some doors are opening in our society.
Left brains, right brains, and board games. It's not an easy task to do. You need to whistle the song Stayin' Alive with enough skill for your teammate to identify the 1970s disco hit. On your next turn, your partner draws a clue with his eyes closed, and you have to guess what it is. You might also find yourself spelling words backward in order to win a round. These odd challenges are part of the whole brain board game that tries to satisfy the world's intellectual hunger, appropriately called cranium. In November 1997, personal experience led Richard Tate to consider this new type of board game that, unlike popular Uniskill games, incorporates a variety of talents. On vacation with his wife and another couple, they found themselves stuck indoors one rainy afternoon and decided to pass the time with a board game. They first played Pictionary, and Tate and his wife badly beat the other team. His competitors then sought revenge and quickly challenged Tate and his wife to a game of Scrabble. Tate admits his friends were the overwhelming victors in the popular word game. I felt terrible and wondered why there wasn't a game where everyone that plays can have a chance to shine. Still a competitive, fun board game, but one where everyone can show what they are good at, explains Tate. When Tate and his good friend Whit Alexander left their jobs at Microsoft, they vowed to jump at any future opportunities to work together. So Tate approached Alexander to help him examine the possibilities of producing a new board game. In only 9 short months, the two former Microsoft employees conceived a unique game that is designed to include something for everyone, and took it to a market that had been craving something different. Once they decided to take the proverbial plunge, they began conducting research to further develop the concept of their whole brain game. The two gathered as much knowledge as they could about the history of social games, comparing their findings against the criteria for cranium. Their conclusion was to develop a left brain, right brain game, but neither knew much about the hypothesis, so they began researching the field of intellectual psychology. Tate and Alexander would soon discover a Harvard University researcher named Howard Gardner, whose theory of multiple intelligences postulates that there are 8 core competencies where people show intelligence, such as linguistic, mathematical, interpersonal, or spatial. We thought it was a really rich framework to try to base the game design on, so we built up from Gardner's work, explains Alexander. The two inventors identified a number of occupations that people might pursue if they are gifted in one of Gardner's intelligences. They then broke down the findings into subject matters or areas of interest that those same people would be exceptionally strong in, ensuring each player their moment to shine. After about 3 months of research, Alexander and Tate realized the novelty of their approach to the board game market. In total, they had come up with 14 different activities, each one innovative in its own right. One such example is sculpturades. As the name suggests, this activity requires players to sculpt clues from clay while their teammates guess what they are sculpting, bringing out the child in the most mature adults. The duo's commitment to research and quality design took them through 10 different cranium clay recipes and multiple scents, before settling on a purple, citrus-smelling clay that boasts a long shelf life. Tate says that customers often email them for more of the stuff because they like it so much. Next, they decided upon 4 unique groups of question cards, including Creative Cat, which features sculpting and drawing activities, Data Head, which focuses on trivia, Word Worm, which includes vocabulary-based questions, and Star Performer, featuring performance-based activities. It is the team with the best combination of these skills that eventually wins the game. Cranium avoids play dynamics that allow one group to overwhelm another by limiting each team to one task before passing the turn to the next player. Tate says this is just one example of hundreds of game dynamics they fine-tuned throughout the playtests. But, he adds, there was one constant throughout the testing period. People were having a good time. We originally started with a much broader vision than just a board game, explains Tate. He says they looked at the 1980s and how the heart was so heavily emphasized in conjunction with good health. He thinks that the brain is going to be the organ of focus for the new millennium. And we would like to be the company that's at the forefront of providing fun things to do with your brain to keep it happy and healthy. This strategy has made Cranium a standout among its competitors in the board game industry, as there simply is no other game that offers such a large variety of activities. Today, the pair's main challenge is building the Cranium brand name, and Tate alludes to a potential TV show as well as new Cranium products in the distant future.